Well, welcome. Do you guys remember at launch in 2012, or a couple of months just after, when people started crafting their first legendary items? People realized that there were these mysterious Mystic Forge recipes that required you to do an obscene amount of stuff, and finally you could end up with a legendary weapon. I actually think that Guild Wars 2 did the idea of legendaries really well. They were hard to get, especially at launch, and they were extremely flashy. Well, many years on, it turns out there's a lot more to do. So I've kind of done a bit of a clickbaity title, or I intend to title and thumbnail for this video, because really I'm making this video for a lot of those ex-players and old players who haven't been keeping an eye on the game, who may be wondering just what legendaries look like in Guild Wars 2 now, what it means to have legendaries as the echelon has continued to be pushed and the amount of stuff you need to get has gone up and up and up. Because it's actually now true, and I started working on this project a couple of months ago, it's now true that you can pretty much have a full legendary character. That is, all your weapons can be legendary, your trinkets, your armor, the lot. And there's actually a huge amount to go into with that. It's not something I really pursued for a long time. I'm more interested in a lot of the other unlocks in the game, but starting about in November-ish, I decided, hey, I'd go for it. This has only actually been possible for a little while. It was earlier in the year that the 2 final trinkets were added, and in today's video I want to show you guys what they all look like and what it meant to collect them. Also, where the game might go in the future. Now, to anyone looking at this character right now and thinking, oh, that looks kind of crap, but don't worry, none of this is legendary. I was planning on shooting the video in like a cool prestige looking area here, the library, but then I realized I'm not actually going to be demonstrating this stuff on my original main. That's this character here, Liz. The reason for that is because if you're going to go full legendary, you need to deal with underwater stuff too, and an elementalist only has 1 underwater weapon, so that would be cheating. Instead of showing off on this character who has access to the library, then we're going to go to another one who I've got everything set up on. Let's have a look. So what you're now looking at is a fully legendary character. If I unsheath my weapons, you'll see an absolute explosion of effects and various things floating and hovering around the character, which I'm going to dive through what all of this is as we go forward, and I'll show you that again. There's kind of a big thing with legendary items that on the moment of unsheathing, they play an effect, and when you have enough of them, it means you get kind of a bit of a ridiculous light show. There's actually a lot further you can go with the cosmetics here as well, but I'm being restrained. What I'm really only, and I know this doesn't look restrained, but what I'm really only showing you is the gear itself. I'm not doing any weird infusion-based stuff, which we will get to, but just a little bit later on in the video. So let's open up our equipment panel and see what we've got. Well, first of all, you've got the armor on the left, and this is legendary, has a specific process to go through it. If you look at the tooltips, they're all massive. I've just done that for the purpose of the video. It's not really a real build. We have 4 legendary weapons here, split across 2 generations. You had the first set of legendary weapons like this here. Frostfang was the first generation, and then the second gen, which all the other ones I actually currently have equipped are. Then we have trinkets. Each trinket has its own story and area of acquisition that's completely unique. It's not like a whole set got released at once like you saw with the armor. They all have kind of very, very bespoke areas to acquire them. And then finally, 2 underwater legendaries and an aqua breather we'll get to in a moment. And then there's the gathering tools too, which we can talk about. So why would you do this, first of all? Well, cosmetics is one thing. I think the purest Guild Wars franchise players, I should say, really only care about the cosmetics. The point is you shouldn't really be stat crept on anyone else. You shouldn't have any benefits over other people. That's not really true in Guild Wars 2 anymore. There is a big benefit for doing this, and that's that when you get legendary gear, you get a couple of perks. First of all, you can slot runes or sigils or any kind of upgrade you like in and out of it for free. You don't have to salvage, you don't have to destroy items, you don't have to use upgrade extractors from the gem store. You can freely put things in and out, but also you can at any time change the stats or the nature of the item itself. There's actually a new bit of UI, some of you guys out of touch with the game might not have seen, is the customize panel. So here I will customize my legendary chest piece, for example. And really, a lot of this is only available to me because I'm legendary. And so you've actually can see here that there's 3 different things I can customize. First of all, the legendary item stats itself. So here I have celestial stats, which means I get a bit of everything in the game. Or I could choose to make it berserkers if I like. And if I click this button, it becomes berserkers absolutely no cost. It's just the time it took me to do that. And I could do that on every piece. So that's actually a huge benefit for people that play long term and want to shuffle their builds around. If you play a lot of World vs. World, which I've been doing recently on Mesmer, or on any class you like, and you like to tinker and try new stat sets, you want to try different varieties of Condi or power or whatever, you can constantly be swapping this stuff. So one of the main advantages to going full legendary is that you can build craft for free without the cost, you know, the heavy cost that might be associated with other stuff. Like some of these stat types might only be found in certain areas with certain currencies of an expansion that's super irritating to get, takes a ton of bank space. Well, with the customized panel, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it is every single stat in the game, as you can see. Also, if you do start getting lots of legendary items, there's actually this checkbox here as well. So because I have all the armor, if I'm full Celestial, which you saw at the start of the video, if I want to go full Carrion now, or Cavaliers, I can hit the checkbox, and that will just apply it to everything of the armor. And then I do it again for the trinkets, weapons, and suddenly all my gear is changed. Again, no currency, no bank space. So that's actually a massive perk. I actually think it's kind of gross, and I would prefer a version of the game where that wasn't a perk. But for those of you who want that added incentive, there is that in Guild Wars now. I should mention in editing here, too, that this functions really well with the build template setup. So you can have legendary gear, the same legendary item in like 6 different build templates, and the game will automatically swap it through whatever you've assigned. It's all very, very smooth. It works very well. There were some bugs when it first came in, but it's all pretty clean now. The one downside to doing this is you can't really have unique transmutations or play Fashion Wars on every individual tab. It will always be the same transmute. You know, you can make the legendary armor look like whatever you want, but it would be the same across all tabs. Nonetheless, though, very good for build crafters. There's also, of course, at the bottom, the Infusion, just a tiny little bit extra stats. For the purpose of this video and most of the demonstration, I just have a standard +5 power, +9 agony resist infusion in all my slots. There's 20 to 25 slots to fill on any build, so it can be quite expensive and take a while. But once you have them, if the base item is legendary, again, you can move them in and out. Maybe if I'm playing World vs. World and a Condi build, I might want to put a malign World vs. World infusion in instead, which gives me bonus damage to guards, lords, and supervisors in World vs. World. So again, that's a little bit of freedom. Lastly, there's the rune. So this is actually pretty new. There are now legendary runes and sigils. Those who have been watching my channel over the years will remember when these came in. I only just started collecting these. Again, this was the main thing I started doing probably in November. We're coming up to the end of January now as I shoot this video. And the idea of a legendary rune is that it doesn't have improved stats or anything. It doesn't get a tier 7 perk or whatever. But just like with the armor, where you can swap it whenever you like, you can now do that for runes too. What does that mean? That means every single rune in the game, look as I scroll here, is on this list. And I could pick any of them. Now, getting all 6 runes does take a long time. There's a lot of time gating in there. Specifically, they ask you to go for Provisioner tokens, which is a currency that came in with Heart of Thorns, the first expansion. And that really takes a lot of time gating, and they can even be fairly expensive. But the value of this is massive. Case in point, and again, you can use the checkbox to quickly slot stuff in. Case in point, look at something like Leadership runes. Now, you might be unfamiliar with these. They're pretty good runes, and through various metas they've been in use. But to actually get this rune, an exotic rune of leadership, superior rune of leadership, you'd have to go to Dragon's Stand and do a ton of meta events there to get the specific currency just to spend it on these runes, which then you may end up getting rid of later as you overwrite them. Well, I don't have to do any of that. I can just go full leadership in a couple of clicks of the button, and there you go. I have my leadership runes there. So, you know, this is really, really massive value, this swapping. There are also legendary sigils now, too, so going over to my weapons. The sigils are crafted in a similar way to the runes. I actually think the sigils are more beneficial than runes. It depends what game type you play and when and how, but I find I swap sigils all the time. So if, as you guys are watching this video, you're somewhat inspired and you're thinking, yeah, maybe I'll go for this, I do recommend getting the sigils first. Again, though, it kind of depends what you play. Maybe if you're more PvE oriented, perhaps the runes are better. But I love swapping sigils. I think that there's so much interesting stuff you can do with them. Even in PvE, for example, swapping knight sigils on or slaying sigils. It's also, you know, there's less sigils to get in theory. Maybe you only want 4 sigils for your weapons, but you would need 6 runes. So it's kind of a lower bar to entry, sort of. There are 2 other big benefits to going full legendary that aren't just the cosmetics. And those are kind of the things that compelled me to do it only just now, towards the end of the year. First of all, there's a new expansion coming out. That's the End of Dragons expansion. And I can never really quite get over how ridiculous this looks. Now, with End of Dragons, they're going to be adding a bunch of new runes and a bunch of new sigils and a bunch of new stat types, just as they do as Living World comes out. And so what that means is now that I've done with this project, the second the X-Pack launches, and I mean the minute I log in after it patches, I can open these panels and I can hit customize and I can see all the new goodies. I don't have to beat the story. I don't have to learn any of the new metas or any of the new currencies. I don't have to do anything in the expansion. I immediately have the lot. And especially for runes, where they might do fun and interesting quirky new mechanics, and sigils, that's very, very exciting to me. In fact, when it comes out, I might even be able to squeeze a video out in the early hours showing you guys all these things. I honestly think that capability is nuts. Like, what kind of MMO does that? Guild Wars does. It's crazy that that's the situation Arena that's going to put the players in, but they have it. We're going to have that power. And then finally, there has been a feature announced called the Legendary Armory. Now, what the Legendary Armory means, and we don't quite know how it'll look in the UI and so on, they're still working on it, but they've confirmed that the Legendary Armory will allow all characters on your account to access a legendary at all times. So, for example, here, I have this Generation 2 Scepter, Zequotl. Now, this is just on this Mesmer right now, and if I wanted to put this on, say, my Guardian, I would have to unequip it, put it in the bank, put it out, equip it, and then if I wanted to move it back, do the whole thing in reverse. That's kind of annoying. Once the Armory is out, my Guardian will just always have it available, while at the same time my Mesmer always has it available, and so on and so on and so on. So if you do that with Legendary Armor, say you get a set of Legendary, Medium, Light, and Heavy, everyone always has all stats all the time at max value on your account. Even if you had like 60 character slots filled in, they all immediately have that gear. That's what the Armory will do. And again, that's going to absolutely accelerate the value in collecting legendary items. And particularly with Trinkets, which will always work everywhere. You know, there's heavy, medium, and light for armor, but there's not heavy, medium, and light for trinkets. So this amulet, once the Armory comes in, all the characters on my account forevermore will have a legendary amulet available. It's crazy. I mean, you'd have to hit level 80, but still, very, very powerful. So those are the big reasons to do it. And I think that there are numerous of them now, and I think you will see as time goes forward, more and more people go for this. I'm not really making this video to brag necessarily. I do think I'm a pretty early adopter though. I might not be in the first 100, but maybe not even the first 200, but as time goes forward, this will really be the main thing that everybody goes for, and I'm glad to have it done, you know, nice and early now. So, let's run through now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how each item was acquired. And so I'm going to hit up this equipment template slot here where we're just wearing nothing, all right? And we'll slowly filter stuff in, and you guys can see where all the shinies are coming from. So first of all, you've got Legendary Armor. And each time we slot one, the main thing with Legendary Armor you'll notice is that while you have your weapon, if you're in a fighting stance, like here, in fact, we should probably, no, it's fine. While you're standing and you're not in a fighting stance, it kind of, they go away. You see this, you get this animation. It looks very subtle. Not too much is happening. But as soon as you pull your fists out or whatever weapon you'd have equipped, it kind of does like the Marvel superhero thing where the mask flips on and then all this energy comes out. And every single slot has that. So here we have the shoulders again, and you'll see right as I equip them, the shoulders grew. The chest piece tends to be a major slot, so here I'll move my hands down. Now when we equip the chest, you'll see it doesn't really cover too much of our body, but as soon as I start fighting, we get a huge explosion of energy, and all of the these sort of trinket-y looking effects come exploding out of our back before going away, and now we have this here. So the chest piece is kind of a big piece. That's the same for medium and heavy, which I'm not showing in this video. I actually really like the heavy effect, but that's kind of the idea of the armor. The armor was originally only available from raids, and basically time gated through raids. Nowadays, there are so many raid wings that if you're really dedicated to it, the time gate is not even that major. You can get it very, very quickly. If you're very dedicated, it does mean you're going to be doing a lot of raiding. You can also alternatively acquire this gear through World vs. World and PvP now. And it looks different. If you get Legendary PvP armor, it looks different to Legendary PvE or World vs. World. And again, that's further split by armor class. So there is a lot to go for, and I'll come back to that topic in a second. I don't really have too many memories of acquiring this. I did it a long time ago now. It was reasonably fun, but these most recent years, I haven't been much of a raider. I don't get too much out of the scene, to be perfectly honest with you. So then we have weapons. Just looking at my inventory here, I've got a bunch of Gen 1 weapons here, you know, just sort of there ready for the class. But you guys might be interested in some of the Gen 2 stuff. So here's the Quattle, for example. One of the things that you can see is this is the Generation 2 Scepter, and while we have it equipped, you actually get a whole, like, familiar with you. This isn't a full-on pet. It won't fight for me. It doesn't actually exist separate from me. It just kind of walks near me. But it's a really cool effect. It's one of my favorite things in the game, honestly. I love this scepter. Especially on Mesmer, when you create clones of yourself and phantasms, it will create clone versions of that too. So I went for that, and I also went for a mini pet that kind of looks like multiple creatures too, just to play into this. Another great thing from Gen 2 that I love comboing this scepter, just for appearance, not necessarily gameplay, is the focus. This is the Binding of Ipos. That's that book at my side. It's a really incredible legendary, possibly my favorite in the game. You can really look at all the detail. Now, when you unsheath it, you get this giant demonic hand, which a lot of people think looks kind of gross, but hey. And you also get another kind of familiar now. You're actually reading from this tome that's out in front of you. And in fact, if you get on a mount or something, we're not really talking about mount cosmetics or titles or all those other things right now. But if you get on a mount, you're even reading the book while you're on the mount, which is really badass. So here we get kind of the double effect when you're on this weapon set. Then I have, you know, a couple of other weapons. I won't go through too many of them. The Gen 2 legendaries generally are a little bit more fun to go for. You can't buy them anymore. Back at launch, you could just straight up buy legendaries, which meant that you could just spend Mummy's credit card and that was it. That's not actually possible for these Gen 2 ones, which adds a little bit of prestige, I suppose. Let's head over now to the trinkets. So, obviously, there's lots of back pieces. You guys will probably be familiar with this. This is the legendary PvE back piece from Fractals on the Mists, which I think kind of complements the idea of the legendary armor the most. By the way, none of this is dyed. This is all default dyes. I haven't gone with all of that. Again, I don't have too many memories. I did that years ago. And it's just basically playing Fractals. The next trinket that came in was Aurora. Now, this came in right before the Path of Fire expansion. And this was essentially for playing a ton of Living Worlds Season 3. So that's Bitterfrost Frontier and Lake Doric and all those maps. And I actually have a ton of memories of Aurora. Aurora, I think, was a perfect legendary. It felt like a really good send-off to a season. When it got added to the game, I had so much reason and passion to go back to all those maps they've been adding over the year. There were players everywhere. I especially remembered spending a ton of time on Draconis Mons. It's a legendary item, so it takes a lot of effort. People, I think, look back on it as being a grindy legendary. But to me, I just saw that as a lot of meaningful playtime and worthwhile stuff to do to get more gear. It was really fun. I very, very much enjoy and have fond memories of Aurora. Then there was the Season 4 trinket. Now, this is called Vision. Vision was way easier, or for some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it was just where I was at this time in my life. But Vision, I have almost no memories of. I feel like I just kind of got this without putting much effort in at all. Maybe someone watching this video had the complete reverse experience. But I feel like I did a lot for Aurora and I did nothing for Vision. In fact, to tell you the truth, I'm so disconnected from Vision that if I wasn't recording this video right now, mousing over it, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you the name of this one. Really. I would forget, was that a ring or was that an accessory? I don't have much passion for this one. By the way, we also have the cosmetics, so the back piece is pretty self-evident. When we equip Aurora, though, you'll notice I've got this purple glow around me. It kind of matches the backpack, which is nice. I've got this purple glow around me, and when I unsheath my weapons, we also have these orbs in the sky. You see these that are sort of floating around? So the way that these trinkets work is the more trinkets you build, they combo into one another and upgrade this effect. I think ArenaNet went a bit quick on this. Maybe the first legendary should have just been one orb that was floating, and then the second was another, and then another, or whatever. But as it stands, just one of these gives you these orbs. And you can pick, do you want to do the Season 3 one or the Season 4 one? Now, if you equip both together, you'll see the orbs change, and now they're like these kind of floating bubbles. And it's kind of harder to see now because we've got so much stuff stacking up. But you'll see they're kind of oozing around together and connecting, and they're sort of globbing around. So that's what it looks like when you have two. And also just the passive aura effect. I believe the colors changed, maybe become a little bit more prominent. We're now constantly glowing. So then finally we have, I'm pretty sure it's Coalescence. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's Coalescence. So Coalescence was the third one that they added. This is a raiding trinket. So they'd done trinkets for Fractal. Sorry, a back piece for Fractal. They had then done the accessories for Living World. Well, they did a ring for Raid. And maybe the original idea was to continue adding Raid wings and then there'd be a second ring from Raids eventually. But that kind of stopped. So here's what happened. We got one ring called Coalescence. It upgrades the effect again. If you have all three, it kind of becomes this crazy thing, which reminds me of like some old early 3D renders from the 90s or something, some weird-ass concept art. But there you have it. I actually don't like this effect as much as just the T2. And a lot of people deliberately opt not to wear these all at once because they think this looks a bit rubbish and a bit strange. It can look kind of interesting with certain transform skills. Like if you make yourself... I wonder what happens if we become the avatar of a Landry. Does it go away? Yeah, but if you're a necromancer and you like go into lich form, it looks really big and really crazy and, you know, a little bit more impactful. But this is how it kind of feels to have all three. And you'll notice that the aura around us now is looking kind of white. That is the final upgrade. This is what they had done. There was still missing an amulet. There was still missing a ring. To talk about actually acquiring Coalescence, by the way, just for a moment, I personally didn't enjoy this much. Now, that's because I'd raided a lot for armor, like, years before. And then when this came out, I had enough currency from the previous raiding, and I'm not a big raider. I had enough to just trade up and grab Coalescence. So I feel like I didn't really put much energy into it. I did this very recently. This is one of the newest legendaries I've acquired. It's just a few months old on my account. And really, the thing I remember most from this is not raiding for it, but playing Path of Fire expansion maps. So you actually needed some POF legendary constituent items to build it, which meant I was doing Path of Fire metas and Path of Fire hearts and acquiring their stuff. And that was actually a really fun experience for me. It almost feels like a POF legendary to me. And then maybe they could have done a Heart of Thorns one or waited for the new expansion. Who knows? But instead, they didn't wait. What happened a few months ago was they added both the amulet and the ring at the same time. And they kind of like paired, which is weird to me, first of all, can I just say, because an amulet is kind of a special slot. It has a ton of stats on it. It's not the same as a ring. You'd think the two rings are paired, but they're not. So what happened? Well, they gave the PvPers an amulet, and they gave the World versus Worlders a ring. And the PvP has got the amulet, I suppose, because amulets are a big part of PvP buildcraft. So they get to have fun with that. But I sort of can't help but feel the World versus Worlders got a little bit gypped here, just collecting a ring. The process for acquiring these is not too bad, honestly, either. In fact, the amulet I would recommend anyone who currently PvPs to pick up, because it is pretty easy, and at the end of the day, it is a lot of stats, and it is a legendary item. But it's only for those of us who PvP. And this is the weird thing. These two legendaries, even though neither of them are necessarily that tricky to get, I mean, they're legendaries, they're expensive, they are a time investment. They're not that bad compared to the others, but it does mean going outside of your normal area. A lot of people will have been following along with this video and thinking, yeah, I can do this, yeah. But now they realize they need to PvP, and they need to play tournaments in PvP. So suddenly they might think, oh, I'm not going to do it now. Or they hear that they've got a big World versus World process to go through, and they think that they're not going to go through it. I do recommend it, mostly because of the armory, and just being able to fill in these last two slots means that you can use the customized checkbox over here to great effectiveness and go everything's assassins or everything's whatever you want it to be. If you still have to craft manually these amulets and lug them around, like, your inventory is just going to look really weird and bizarre. Like, you may as well go the whole way if you're this far. So the other thing to know that's weird about this amulet and ring, because they got added together later, is they do not upgrade this orb effect. They give their own effect. So here's what it looks like. If we equip Conflux, first of all, combine your strength and vanquish your foes is the flavor text here. What it will actually do is add, and I don't think we need our, oh no, we do need our weapons out. What it will do, let's unequip this stuff so you guys can see a little bit clearer here. What it will do is add this orb. You see? On the left. Let's even hide our backpack so that we can see it a bit clearer. So this orb will now follow us around as long as we have a weapon out. It glows and it's got like this misty trail, just like we get for ourselves with the other trinkets, for what it's worth. And if you look into it, you'll actually see that it's a representation of World versus World itself. That's Stone Mist Castle. You can see a bunch of Char waging a war there. Let's re-equip here before it goes away again. And you can kind of really get a good look around. So some people don't like this. I quite enjoy it. I think that maybe just Most people, when they look at it, they see the blue of the sky. They don't really see much detail, but if you really get the camera at the right place, you know, you can see the green grass there and stuff. I think there is a lot in that. It's just in the passing casual moments of wandering around, you kind of don't get the experience. These actually get a really bad rap. And you guys should know as well, when you collect this legendary, you have at first, it has no cosmetic. You have an optional upgrade path for the legendary to make the cosmetic part appear. And a lot of people choose not to upgrade it, which I kind of don't blame them. Maybe you don't want a little orb following you everywhere. Maybe you think that puts a marker over your head or something. But, you know, I've gone really the whole way here. This video is absolutely everything. And then we have the Amulet, which does the similar thing. The Amulet's called Transcendence. The flavor text being Rise Above It All. And this one is orange. So at a glance, they look almost identical, don't they, really? Just different colors and different color trails. But this one is now representing regular PvP, or structure PvP, I should say. Which kind of, the map kind of looks like Eternal Colosseum to me. But, you know, they may just be going for a general arena aesthetic. If I were them, I probably would have picked the Battle of Kylo to depict. But hey, there you go. So, yeah, you get these 2 orbs. And that is the last 2 things from your trinkets there. So, let's go back to my other tab, which I kind of prepared in a very precise way for you guys, with everything all together. Really, one of the main things that I'm most proud of, that is probably getting understated here, is the runes. It's not actually getting the legendaries themselves, these items and the trinkets. It was getting all the upgrades within them. Again, the rune update was a fairly new one, but that's 6 runes, and then that's going to be 4 sigils for the terrestrial stuff, underwater afterwards. Then, yeah, you've got the infusions for the trinkets, not so bad. I would say as well, on the Amulet, you don't get an infusion slot, you get an enrichment slot. There is no such thing as a legendary enrichment. In fact, there are only 3 enrichments in the game that are cosmetic. There is the one that you've been watching right now, which is called the Otter's Blessing. Now, that's this. Can you see? You might have just missed it. If you've been watching the video, you'll see an otter keeps flying around near me and then sort of swimming back into me. It's basically like a Patronus. That is not legendary. It's just an enrichment. It's the newest one that got added to the game, and it's probably the fan favorite. So I've got that equipped. If you don't want to go for that, there is the Celebratory Birthday Enrichment. This is for having a character 8 years old, I think, so it takes a long time if you're new. But if you haven't been playing the game for a while, you'll have it already. And what that does, now this is going to be kind of hard to see, but it creates fireworks. You see that too, that fireworks. Whenever you sheath and unsheath, you see different fireworks coming around. And a big Guild Wars 2 logo can appear in the fireworks sometimes. There you go. So that one's a little bit more dramatic. But doesn't sort of have the passive thing going on. And then finally, there's only one other one. That's Koda's Warmth. This is a few years old now. It came in with Bitterfrost Frontier back in Season 3. There is a money cost on it, and that's creating this orange-reddy kind of warmth in my heart. I remember people being disappointed this effect wasn't bigger back then, and not too many people actually have it. If rarity and scarcity is your main thing, the highest value, best one to go for is Koda's Warmth. If you look at stats about the game online, you will see a ton have the Otter, that's new and people love it. A ton have the Fireworks, because you just get that for having an old account, but Koda's Warmth, that's the rare one. So that's all this stuff. Now let's talk about underwater. So this is really where it gets a bit insane and where my video is kind of above and beyond. I think everything I've been talking about so far, a lot of people have done, but not many people go as far as doing underwater. So I actually have 2 underwater legendary weapons. So I have Kraken here. And then both weapons also have their own legendary sigils on. So I've got another 4 sigils. Every sigil is a long time gate, really, unless you want to spend a huge amount of money. So I have actually been delaying doing this video for at least a month, while I just slowly work towards these final 4 sigils, just so that the complete picture can be every slot truly is done. And then in the Aqua Breather here, I have a 7th legendary rune as well. It's nuts. This is as far as you can go as of the game today. And they're all infused as well. So I'm pretty proud of that. The truth is that for this video, I have all this set up. But as soon as I'm done recording, I'm actually going to remove these sigils probably and just slot them into alternate weapons. Like I'll probably put these all on my Elementalist. And then no matter what weapon my Ellie likes to wield, whether it's a staff or a scepter or a focus, they're just going to have these sigils in them. So that's quite nice. And maybe I'll keep building them up as I wait for the new expansion. We'll see. This is truly insane. There is really very little point to doing this. There's not much underwater content. Maybe the new expansion will add a lot more. Maybe the expansion will add Generation 2 legendary weapons as well, because they don't actually exist for underwater right now. But we'll have to see. closing the video out, let's talk about where we go from here. Now, I just described myself as like at the end of the road because I've done this complete insanity even with the underwater stuff. Like, where would you go from here? And there actually are some ideas, and they're truly insane. I just want to excite you guys about them. I will not be doing what I'm about to talk about because it's absolutely too nuts. But I want to show you the potential of where you can continue to go in terms of gear growth in this game at this point. And I'm only going to be talking about gear. I'm not talking about minis and titles and mounts and all that other stuff, which I'm also interested in, but we'll just keep it with the gear here. So first of all, I like the idea of tabs. So here, I've got this equipment tab is filled in, and this is all PvE stuff, really, right? It's the Legendary Armor from PvE, it's the Legendary Backpack from Fractals, and so on. But what you can do, in theory, is build the other format stuff. So, for example, in tab 1 here, this is how it looks for PvP. So this is the PvP Legendary Armor with the PvP Legendary Back piece. And you'll notice it's a little bit less flashy. Oh, and the best PvP weapons as well I have equipped here. These change color based on where you are. If you're on red team, they change color. If you're on blue team, or if you're on green team in World vs. World. So this is a bit more subtle, but really it comes down to dyes. This is all default dye right now. But if I do go to my dyes for this set, and say we go permafrost on the chest piece, you'll see you can actually dye a very crazy aura, similar to what the PvE legendary stuff gets. And depending on which dye you look, it can either look very prominent, and it can look good, or it can look bad. These are these tendrils that end up coming out. You'll also see I've got some little dots floating around me, these little cubes. They're just infusions, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, so you could do a tab of each. Now, you could also then go for a World vs. World tab. I'm not much of a World vs. Worlder, so my World vs. World stuff has gone a long way to go, all right? I don't even have the top tier stuff. There's like 4 different armor sets you need to work through, and there's just so much time gating. And then the whole back piece. I actually do not have the 3rd backpack. I have the PvP one, I have the PvE one, I don't have Warbringer. So, you know, that's something you could work on as well, and you could do your World vs. World stuff too. So, maybe filling in a whole World vs. World tab is also an idea. Then you've obviously got the other armor classes if you want to go that far. That's an idea. Next, you've got Infusions. And this is where things can get really insane. So, there is no such thing as a Legendary Infusion. But there are things you can do. So, I have +5, +9. Right? The mighty +9 infusion. What you could do is go for raw agony infusion. So here, this is, oh, that's a +7. You could get a +10 agony infusion, and then you could get a +11 and +12 and +13 and 14 and so on. The way you get the higher tiers is just by crafting the previous tier together. So what that means is the price goes up exponentially. And in fact, if I show you on the trading post, if I type +13, a +13 agony infusion is 119 gold to buy one of them. A +14 is 245 gold. +15 is 490. So, and so on and so on and so on. You see, if I go up to a +19, oh, they're not even on there. 17. Here, a +17 agony infusion is 2,000 gold for one infusion. Now, why might you like to do that? Well, in Fractals, there is obviously the potion that you drink, and that converts your stats. Where is it? I'm mousing around for it here. This Infinite Mist Omni Potion, that converts your agony into real stats. So if you had enough agony resist, eventually maybe you would get statistical benefit out of that. But it would be an insane amount of money. Because here's the thing, +17 is already 2 grand. Through data mining, I guess, it has been determined the highest one in the game's files, is +30. You could put a +30 agony infusion in every slot. Now, the estimated price of a +30 agony infusion is 8,031,588 gold. 8 million gold every single slot. And then 3 times in the ring and twice in the backpack. That would be a lot of work. If you did that, if you had a +30 in all slots, just from your gear, you'd have like 600 agony resist, which is absurd. You only need like 150 to play the game type. But you could do that. You could go crazy for infusions, really. And I believe that there is no such thing. No one has ever made even a +24 in the history of the game. Let alone +30. So the idea of getting that is just, you know, it's some gargantuan, almost impossible task. But it's there and it's possible, and I think it's fun to think about. Another thing you can do with infusions that's maybe a little bit more realistic is collect all the unique infusions. So, there is stuff in the game like the Chak egg sac, right? I don't even know. I don't know which ones are actually going to be on the trade post. A lot of these are very expensive. You know, they can reach around 10 to 20,000 gold a pop. But there's a ton of infusions that give you a special aura. So going back to our PvP thing here, these little dots around me, these are coming from the Moto's Unstable Bauble Infusion Blue and Unstable Bauble Infusion Red. I've stacked them together so you can see both blue and red. Well, maybe you would have another infusion here with a different kind of cosmetic, and then another, and another, and another, and another. Now, I'm not going to turn this video into listing out all the infusions. It would take way too long. But just so that you know, across all the gear, including the 5 slots for underwater, there are 20 slots that you can fill. And funnily enough, there are about 20 unique infusions in the game. So you can have a character that fills every slot with one of the unique cosmetics. And you would look horrendous, I just want to say at that point. You would look so ugly and gross and just bad. Like, one of the infusions just makes you look black, right? And it kind of gets rid of all the color. So then what all the other infusions going to look like? It would be rubbish. It really would be. But it's kind of a form of prestige, and you could therefore do it. There is a weird complicating thing as well, which is that with Halloween, they added these things called the poly infusions, which basically just tint you a different color. And, you know, they're not that expensive, but this is kind of boring. There's, you know, green and teal and black all at once. Like, so maybe you would just pick one of these and then the rest would all be infusion. And there's just about enough, honestly, that you could fill all 25 slots. And it's funny how well that works out. Finally, let's talk about the game's future and the expansion, where ArenaNet can go. Now, I obviously already talked about the Legendary Armory, which is going to be a big thing for legendary weapons, but can they expand the game in any other ways? Well, actually, they can, and you might have noticed I glossed over this a little bit. I've been a bit sneaky. I say I'm full legendary. I say I'm done. But really, I only mean to date, because the truth is that while I've got everything possible, my Aqua Breather is not legendary. There isn't a legendary slot for this in the game right now. Now, people think the next expansion is going to be kind of heavily water-themed and so on. Look at the logo, for example. So it seems maybe we will see the final slot, the legendary Aqua Breather, come with the X-Pack. And what does that mean? Well, right now, while I can pull the rune in and out, and I can customize the rune, because this is a legendary rune I put in it, the item itself, I can't change the attributes of, and I can't pull the infusion out at will. This is it. So, yes, there is this. I do expect ArenaNet will go for it. As I mentioned before, there's Gen 2 of these weapons. There are some other kooky ideas. There's gathering tools at the very bottom. Now, you'll see my gathering tools are technically rare. Gathering tool, maybe a legendary tier could come in one day. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe they could do legendary glyphs for gathering tools, but this is all just gem store stuff. I think the odds are very low for this. Maybe they'll have some kind of release on the gem store that adds new gathering tools that on the UI has legendary coloring on the text, but functionally it's no different. But I can't see what they would do here. What is possible is maybe a legendary infusion. You know, I have a legendary item with a legendary rune, but the infusion is rare. So maybe you could have a legendary infusion. These, for example, are ascended. What would that look like, though? Well, I would suggest it would be an infusion that you can swap to any stat you like at will. And that would be very, very, very useful and handy for build crafters. I can really see that. Therefore, I actually think there's a high chance the devs might do this one. Also, being able to swap it from an Agony infusion into a World versus World infusion, for example, that would be pretty cool. I could see it. They don't necessarily need to do anything with the cosmetics. And ultimately, there's 25 slots here. So if they do something like Provisioners tokens again, like they did with the runes and sigils, some kind of time gating mechanism, or just a lot of money, that would be a real cash cow and a real sink for the super hardcores out there. So I actually have to say I do believe in a legendary infusion. Whether it would be with End of Dragons, I don't know. A legendary infusion that has a unique visual on it for every slot as well. Kind of like how each trinket added like an extra little orb and stuff. I don't know, man. I think that for the visuals, we're kind of done at this point. I know it's Guild Wars to care about the visuals, but I mean, Jesus. We look pretty busted and ridiculous as we wander around, don't you guys think? I mean, that weapon set wasn't even, you know, with everything. So, I'm not too sure on cosmetics. And then, the weirdest idea, but nonetheless may happen, is actually bags. Bags have rarity, guys. So, for example, this ancient carcass shell box from the original precursor dropping event years ago. fondly looking back on at the end of this long road, or as we continue along this road. They also, when Path of Fire came out, added the 32 slot bags. Now, they're ascended bags. So maybe you could have a legendary bag. And what would that have? Maybe 32 slots, maybe 33 slots, a little bit more inventory space. But crucially, what it could do is you might be able to right-click it and change the bag's behavior. Because don't forget, in Guild Wars 2, different bags do different things. You can have invisible bags, bags that equipment goes directly into. Like down here, I have this fractal exotic equipment box. If I ever get rares and stuff dropping, they immediately filter into this box at the bottom. So maybe I should be able to right-click and customize all my bags and have that. This is a weird one because it's kind of just there for the sake of continuing going legendary. And then you have even more slots to fill in. But it almost feels like these should just be options. But I mean, they monetized it already in the crafting system, so maybe that's something they can do. After that, all right, if they fill all that stuff in, I think we're pretty much cooked at that point, guys. There are other random items that end up like with legendary text. For example, if you beat the Ecto Gambling achievements, you can get items with legendary tooltips. And, you know, I've got those collected as well, but they don't really count. I think really we've got enough at this point, especially with the plus 30 thing. That's it, guys. Thanks very much for watching this long, extended brag after I spent so long building these freaking underwater sigils. And I will see you on the next one very soon. Please do remember, I'm doing a daily series about the expansion coming up as well. It's a Q&A series. You don't need to have watched the old ones. Just jump in. Honestly, the more the merrier. Check it out on my channel page, and I'll see you next time. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to say, look, if you guys have other ideas, obviously drop your comments. I'm looking forward to see what people say, whether you think this is excessive, and especially on the topic of, like, whether all this extra stuff beyond cosmetics is enough to get you to pick these up now.